now. Hi, everyone. We're just giving everyone a few seconds to get logged into tonight's webinar. If you are already here with us, I'm putting in chat some information about how you can purchase tonight's featured book, Black Buck. So open up your chat window and check that out. All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Chelsea from Greenlight, and we're thrilled to host tonight's event with Mateo Askaripour launching his new book, Black Buck. He'll be talking with Nafissa Thompson-Spires with a special performance by Lena Hamilton, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thank you to Mateo, Nafissa, Lena, and the team at Upton Mifflin Harcourt for making this event happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make this space for conversation and connection. Now I have just a few housekeeping things to go through. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they cannot see or hear you. Your video and audio won't be turned on. They can see that you're here though, and you can see a count of your fellow attendees at the top of your Zoom screen. There are a couple different ways you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon at the bottom of your Zoom window. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. That's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with your fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions only from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. We are recording tonight's event, so look for video or audio versions on our social media channels later on. And importantly, tonight's featured book, Black Buck, is available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com and Greenlight Bookstore, the place. You can shop in person in our bookstore locations, noon to 7 p.m. every day of the week, and you can purchase Mateo's book and many others on site, or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. You can find that by link in the chat. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. And we're fortunate that Mateo was able to stop by our Fort Greene store earlier this week to autograph copies of Black Buck. So you can find those at the store or order them online while supplies last. Just indicate your signed copy request in the order comments field at checkout. Now to introduce tonight's guests. Special guest Lena Hamilton has spent the past 20-odd years teaching literature and writing and cultivating a collection of poetry. She's a member of the Rhode Island Writers Colony and participates annually in the community's celebration and presentation of incoming artists. You can find her work at penumbraonline.org and 580 Split. Our interviewer tonight is Nafissa Thompson-Spires. She is the author of the story collection Heads of the Colored People, which won the PEN Open Book Award, the Hurston Wright Award for Fiction, and the Los Angeles Times Art Seidenbaum Award for First Fiction. Her collection was also longlisted for the National Book Award, the PEN Robert W. Bingham Award, and several other prizes. She is also the recipient of a 2019 Writing Award. Her short fiction and essays have appeared in the Paris Review Daily, The Root, The White Review, Story Quarterly, Lunch Ticket, and The Feminist Wire, among other publications, and work is forthcoming in multiple anthologies. She currently is an assistant professor of creative writing at Cornell University, teaching both in the MFA and undergrad programs. She'll be speaking with our featured author, Mateo Askaripour. His work aims to empower people of color to seize opportunities for advancement, no matter the obstacle. He's a 2018 Rhode Island Writers Colony writer-in-residence, and his writing has appeared in Entrepreneur, LitHub, Catapult, The Rumpus, Medium, and elsewhere. We're honored to have him as our neighbor here in Brooklyn. His new book, Black Buck, is a crackling satirical debut novel about a young man given a shot at stardom as the lone Black salesman at a mysterious, cult-like, and wildly successful startup where nothing is as it seems. The book has garnered praise from fellow authors including Colson Whitehead, Ryan Amilcar Scott, Gabrielle Bump, and tonight's interviewer, Nafissa Thompson-Spires, who calls Black Buck a hilarious, gleaming satire as radiant as its author. Skaripour has announced himself as a major talent of the school of Ralph Ellison, Paul Beatty, Fran Ross, and Ishmael Reed. Full of quick pacing, frenetic energy, absurd yet spot-on twists and turns, and some of the funniest similes I've ever read, this novel is both balm and bomb. Mateo is going to start us off with a reading from the book. Then he'll be talking with Nafissa, and you'll get to hear a poem from Lena before we open it up to Q&A. Before we begin, I'm going to share a video from the author.
If you were sleeping, well now I'm sure you're up, because I can almost guarantee you'll never read anything like Black Buck. It's the story of a kid, smart but unambitious, who only cared about his mom, girl, and friends doing all he could to grant their wishes. But one day things changed with the arrival of a man who saw something within our character and then began to plan how to teach this kid, inspire and grow his potential for his own gain and the gain of his company. Yeah, you see, it was all mental. As time passed, as it often does, our character went from being Darren to Buck, embracing his new name with love. Struggling to recreate himself like switching books on the shelf. Yeah, within that struggle were mistakes. You could say he lost his true wealth. For what shall it profit a man if he gains the whole world at the cost of his soul? Jesus said that, something that man Buck was never told. He climbed to the top, higher than the Empire State and even Everest. It was a cold world all the way up there alone with no one to protect him. But somehow, with the help of friends new and old, he found a way back to who he was. And with a push, he was sold. I don't like who I am, just another successful token, are the words he told himself staring at his heart, which was more than broken. So our man hatched a plan, I guess you could call it a plot, to redefine what it means to be a minority in the workplace. Yeah, there was trouble, a lot. He got what he got, and he gave what he gave. There were those who came after him, those he couldn't save, including himself. But let's not get ahead. Black Buck, I promise, the truest thing you've ever read. Cool, cut. Yeah.
All right, Mateo, please take it away.
That went better than I thought, even with the lag. I showed that to my friend a couple of days ago, and she said, "You're like the Black Dr. Seuss." And I said, "That's funny, because my next book is called Black Buck and Ham." Everyone, thank you for being here. I know it's been a crazy day. There's a lot of wild stuff going on in the world, in the nation. There has been. You didn't have to come tonight, but you did, and thank you for being here. You know, we're going to be serious at times, but this is overall supposed to be uplifting and lively and positive. So again, thank you for coming here. All right, there's a part of the book that actually speaks directly to what happened today, right? Just a bunch of, honestly, just crazy white people, you know, breaking into the nation's capital. Like, that's not what happened in the book, but there's there's a retaliation in the book because people of color, and I'm using that word specifically. It's not just Black people. It's Black and brown people who have band together are rising up, and some people don't like it. That happens later in the book, but I don't really like spoilers like that, so I'm just going to kick it from the beginning. The inscription reads, "To all those who have ever been made to feel less than, I see you." Then there's an epigraph. "The most unprofitable item ever manufactured is an excuse. John Mason." Author's note: "There's nothing like a Black man on a mission." No, let me revise that. There's nothing like a Black salesman on a mission. He's Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, and any other supernatural, paranormal, or otherwise godlike combination of blood, flesh, and brains. He can't die. Don't believe me? MLK. Yes, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Black salesman. In the same way used car salesmen hawk overpriced hunks of metal that break down once an unsuspecting customer drives off the lot, our man ML to the goddamn K was a salesman to the highest degree. Not only did he sell Black people on the vision of a unified America, but he also sold the United States Supreme Court, which at the time contained 9 white men, the hardest decision makers for any Black man to convince. MLK, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Frederick Douglass were all salesmen. Hell, Nina Simone, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, and every other Black woman who achieved any leap of success was a saleswoman. Oprah, Haida BMW, under your seat, Winfrey is a saleswoman. You get the point. Each and every one of these people was selling something more precious than gold, a vision. A vision for what the world could look like if millions of people were to change their minds. The hardest thing to change. How do I fit into all of this? When will I shut up and get to the point? Don't worry, I'm getting there. I am a Black man on a mission. No, I'm a Black salesman on a mission. And the point of this book, which I'm writing from my penthouse overlooking Central Park, is to help other Black men and women on a mission to sell their visions all the way to the top. So high up that I'll have to crane my neck, like one of those goofy white people in films deciding whether a superhero is a bird or a plane, just to catch a glimpse of them before they're out of sight. Whoosh, bang, poof, the great disappearing act of success. My goal is to teach you how to sell. And if I'm half the salesman every newspaper, blog, and hustler in New York City says I am, then you are in luck. With my story, I will give you the tools to go out and create the life you want, to overcome every seemingly impossible obstacle, to fix the game. Which game, you ask? We'll get there. But before we do, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. 1, let down your guard and open your mind to what I'm going to tell you. I know we're strangers right now. You're likely asking yourself why you should trust me. The good thing is that you already bought this book, so you trusted me enough to part with $26. I won't let you down. 2, understand that I want all people to be successful, but in the same way that Starbucks can't just give out mocha frappuccinos to anyone who doesn't have $14, I can't help everyone. So I'm starting with Black people. If you're not Black but have this book in your hands, I want you to think of yourself as an honorary Black person. Go on, do it. Don't go don blackface and an afro, but picture yourself as Black. And if you want, you can even give yourself a fancy Black name like Jamal, Imani, or Asia. Number 3, say every day is deals day and clap your hands. I know it's strange, but do it. And when you do, think of the number 1 thing you're working toward. It may be a new car, a promotion, someone's affection, or an expensive pair of shoes. Whatever it is, think of it and say, every day is deals day. And clap your hands as loud as you can. As you'll find out, every day is deals day. A day without deals is like a camel without humps. It doesn't exist. At this point, your heart's beating and there's a twinkle in your eye. I know because I've given this speech before. I've given it to myself. I've given it to thousands of people wanting to change their lives. And I've given it to people who didn't know they wanted to change, but needed it. A long time ago, I was one of these people. I was like you, ambitious but afraid, intelligent but impotent, curious but cowardly. I was all of this and more. But freedom, true freedom, the kind where you do what you want without fear, comes at a cost. It's like my urban corner philosopher, cum fairy god uncle Wally Cat used to say. You can change the hands of the clock, but you can't change time. I can give you the tools to change, but only you can change yourself. And if I am successful in teaching you how to sell and fix the game, I ask that you buy another copy of my book and give it to the friend who needs it most, who is stuck like I was and in need of a way out, who is blind to the game but has potential, just like you. Does that sound fair? If so, and if you can do the 3 things I outlined above, then we have a deal. And if we have a deal, it's time for you to do one last thing. Turn the page. Happy selling, Buck. So that author's note, some people get it twisted. That's not from like me, the author. That's from Darren, who becomes Buck, who quote unquote wrote the book. We're gonna jump into a conversation with Nafissa in a second, but a word on Nafissa. So not only is she someone who wrote an incredible collection of short stories, Heads of the Colored People, which I can't recommend highly enough. I mean, I recommend it every time I can. But she's also someone who has just been a source of encouragement and support throughout my own journey. It was a couple of years ago when I first met her. She was giving a reading at a place called Weeksville. Weeksville is a former free settlement of enslaved people, well, formerly enslaved people, one of the first settlements, and it's actually not too far from where I live right now. And me, I didn't have an agent, I didn't have a book deal. I was just a young guy trying to get on by any means necessary. So I'd go to these readings all the time. And I heard about her and her book, and I went to this event. And then she's sitting next to me with her homie. And she's talking to her homie, and they're like having conversation. And then I just butt in, and I'm like, haha, yeah. They look at me like, what? And they just smile, and then they don't say anything. And I'm sweating. I'm like, damn, I messed up. I hope I don't meet her in the future, because she's going to be like, that dude was weird. And I couldn't even stay for her reading. I think she went on like second or third, and I had to bounce. But when I got home, I hit her up on Twitter, and I was like, yo, I couldn't see your reading, but you're dope, and I look forward to your book. And she hit me back, and she was like, yo, I was telling my friend that we probably should have included you in our conversation, because, you know, you were making an effort. And from then on, you know, every milestone I've hit, getting an agent, getting a book deal, she's been there to root for me. And not only that, but she's just an incredible individual. She has hobbies like crafting a bunch of stuff. If you see that cup in the back that says Black Buck, she made that literally like 30 minutes ago, and it looks just like the cover. Someone would describe her as quirky. What I love most about Nafissa, though, is that she is unabashedly herself. You know, Instagram, especially Instagram stories, is where I bug out and let loose, and she does the same, and she's a kindred spirit. So Nafissa, thank you for being the model of a literary citizen. Thank you for being kind to this young guy who didn't have a book deal. He didn't have any accolades. He was a literary no one. And thank you for being in conversation with me today.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Greenlight and Lena and Mateo. I'm so happy to be here. And I really appreciate the way you told that story, because I think there are multiple ways to interpret what happened. And I worried for so long that I was rude to an up and coming writer that day, when I was just really nervous about my own writing. And you were nice enough to still message me and give me a second chance when I felt like I had been, you know, a little aloof. So it's been wonderful to cheer you on from the sidelines and to see all the praise that Black Buck is getting. I don't think we talked about this yet, but it's Jenna Bush Hager's pick. It was on the Today Show. That's a huge deal. So for January, this book is going to be everywhere, and it's totally well deserved. When I say that this is one of the funniest books I've read ever, I really mean that. And every single bit of praise I put into the blurb, I wouldn't, you know, fabricate that. I really, really love this book, and I think that you're a genius in the school of Paul Beatty, Matt Johnson, and like all of my favorite writers. So I'm so happy to do this. I'm gonna just jump in and start asking you some questions. I wanted to know why you decided to write this as a manual. Why did you take the approach of having Darren, one, perform this kind of author's note and perform direct address throughout the entire book to people? And how do you think it kind of serves the satire?
Yeah, so from the beginning, I knew I wanted this book to be incredibly engaging. I wanted there to be multiple climaxes, and I wanted it to be extremely hard for someone to put this book down. I thought about some of the kids that I know from back home and other places, people who are kind and talented, but some people who I know personally never pick up a book, right? You know, we may watch TV or we may talk about films, but they're never really reading fiction. So I said, how do I get this individual to pay attention to the point where they want to read the next page, they want to read the next chapter? And that for me manifested in a plot with a lot of turns. It's an almost manic plot where on one page, right, you are holding your stomach from laughter, I hope. And then on the other page, you want to punch someone in the face. So that was intentional. And that's just also the way that my mind works. But in addition to that narrative, I wanted to be able to help people, especially Black and brown people. And for me, something that I know well, just due to the world that I came from, is sales, and specifically startup sales, and the type of sell where you're picking up the phone and you're calling someone across the country or halfway around the world and looking for them to give you your time and either set another meeting or swipe their credit card. So I said, if I could help this book double as a manual with some of these sales gems, then people, all people, of course, but especially the people that I had in mind when I was writing this book, will be able to take away a few gems that can help advance themselves and the lives of those that they love. And addressing the reader, that came to me in the fourth draft. That came late. That came like a couple weeks before I even queried my agent. I was reading Mitchell S. Jackson's Residue Years, and he was doing that informally when he would say people and then comment on what was going on in the book. And that, with the fact that I read How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia years before that, where the beginning of every chapter is basically a decree or a maxim of what someone has to do, right? Like befriend a bureaucrat, stash money away in a separate bank account, things like that for someone to get filthy rich in Rising Asia. That in combination with sales manuals that I was given when I got into the game, these books by a guy named Jeffrey Gitomer, The Little Red Book of Selling, The Sales Bible, all those three things coalesced into this idea of, let me break the fourth wall to really hit home the fact that this book should double as a sales manual. But I'm not going to make it, something in the cut. It's going to be very conspicuous. It's going to be pulled away from other parts of the narrative, and it's going to be bolded, just like we see here, right, where it's just out there. And lastly, to keep it real, when I was working at this tech startup, I hired a handful of Black and brown people, right, who were picking up the phone and dialing people, whether cold or inbound leads. And that was great. But I wish that I had made it my mission to mentor them and be a Black person that they could turn to, just rather than like this director who was their director, right? And was trying to get the most out of them in terms of squeezing as much productivity as possible. And there were instances when some of them tried to turn to me like that. And I remember just being shocked, being like, oh shit, like they're looking at me as this person when I was like in the sunken place. You know what I'm saying? So this book was a way of helping people in the way that I wish I had helped those people when I was at that company.
That all makes a lot of sense and jives with, I think, the characterization of Darren. Can you talk a little bit more about how your sales background affected things? I mean, you talked about the manuals a little bit, you talked about your background, but I think there's something interesting about the way you promoted the book too. You have these really cool trailers. That was the most gangster thing I've ever seen, that rap video that you made for a book trailer. But you also did these really short, like, character introductions that were animated and that you posted on Instagram one at a time. And I thought that that was a smart technique for setting us up. But what made you decide to do it that way? Was it part of just always be selling, or something deeper?
Something deeper, just part of who I am. For me, over the years, I've spent a lot of work trying to break down my own creative inhibitions and take risks. Like every day when I'm meditating, at the end of my meditation, I tell myself to have courage to take risks, to do the things that I need to do and say the things that need to be said well. So that's just built into my day to day. But when I was putting out that art or even this video, right? It's not like I'm coming into being like, damn, this shit's fire. This is gonna be the best thing ever. There's still, to keep it real, there's trepidation still. I'm like, I don't know how people are gonna receive this. People could laugh at it. People could think that I'm making a mockery of myself or this craft that we have. But more than that, the stronger voice and the voice that I have of so many people in this chat, is to live authentically and to be myself. And this is who I am. I'm someone that takes risks. I'm someone who would commission art, not knowing if there's, not even caring about the return on investment, just for art's sake, just to see the reaction and hopefully positively impact people, and more concretely have other writers be like, wow, this guy's, you know, sort of doing something different. Maybe I could do that too, to promote my art or just to have, you know, more fun. But in terms of my sales background, it gave me so much. It taught me how to speak with people with empathy, actually, not just trying to like convince someone to like, gimme, you know, I got you. It was more so to listen, to be able to really listen to people so that you can tailor your pitch in a way that resonates with them so that you will hopefully help them. Now, there's a darker side, right? Sometimes people want to listen to people so that they can get them, and then the person ends up getting got, you know what I'm saying? But it taught me so much, and it gave me a world of confidence, and the people who entrusted me to lead them. Some of the people in this chat probably gave me so much confidence and encouraged me to push forward, and that I shouldn't allow anything to get in my way. And I owe a lot of those people, even though I wasn't always the best leader and I made so many mistakes. I owe a lot of where I am right now in terms of even having a book out to those people. And the last thing I'll say is that it also, in a way, set me up for failure. That was necessary. When I came out of the world of sales and I wrote my first manuscript, which was, you know, Black Book is the third manuscript I've ever written. The first one, I was writing it when I was still working at that company as an escape, because I felt trapped in a way. And when I left and I began writing, and then I was pitching agents, I had that insane amount of confidence. It was delusional almost. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is like you feel like you can wake up tomorrow and you can be an astronaut, like literally like go to space and do all that crazy stuff, and 1 is thinking that, you know, you're not going to amount to anything, I was an 8. Like I was an 8 when I left this company. And I tried translating that into my journey as a writer. So when I wrote that first manuscript, I was like, all right, bet. I'm coming out of this world of sales, and then I'm just going to be this writer, and then I'm going to be an author, and then it's going to be great. So when that didn't work out the first time, it didn't work out the second time. On that 1 to 10 scale of confidence, I was dropped to a 4. I was at what I describe as creative rock bottom, but I needed that. And I needed that because it allowed me to get closer to myself. It allowed me to reach a place of honesty where I won't allow myself to lie to myself, you know, about things. It allowed me to get closer to my family, to my friends, to nature, and ultimately it allowed me to write this book. So those are just a few of the ways that my sales background has contributed to Black Book.
I love that. And I love that you speak so honestly about failure and multiple drafts, like that it took you until the 4th draft to even come up with the direct address device, which is so integral to the plot. And it would be a completely different book without that. And that you didn't just come out with that right out of the gate. And also that you didn't come just right out of the gate with this super successful book, that you had, you know, seemingly failed manuscripts up to that point. I think as writers, we need to talk a lot more about those perceived failures and the struggle to get here. Heads of the Colored People was not the first book I wrote. It was the first book that I had published, but I had written,
Oh, wow.
I think 3 other manuscripts just like you had. I had a YA novel that was shelved. I had a novel, adult novel, and, you know, Heads was the one that sold. And I've been DMing you about a failed novel draft and how I need you to help me. So to that point, how did you approach characterization? Because there are a lot of characters in this book, and just keeping track of them as from a writerly perspective, I wonder how you organized them, but also how did you avoid making them flat? Because everyone's kind of a type, like Frodo and Rhett, and even Darren to some extent, and his friends, you know, his old friends from the neighborhood, but nobody is a flat character. Even And I think this speaks to what you said about having empathy and learning a lot of empathy through sales. Even the most undesirable characters have some sort of place where you can find empathy for them and where you can relate to them. So how did you do that? Teach me your ways, please, because I'm struggling myself.
Yeah, no one believe her right now. To me, teach her my ways. Yeah, right.
No, I mean it.
But no, I mean, I'm gonna look at whatever you need me to look at, but that'd be an honor. But yeah. So as you said, some people are like a stereotype, at least in the beginning, in some ways, and I did that on purpose. And people who only read a certain portion of the book or read it on its face is like, wait a second, this guy Jason, he's from Brooklyn and he's dressing in Tim's and he's doing X, Y, Z. You need to read more to understand really who Jason is. And he's not just this guy who I described in the beginning as looking like a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, right? Like Jason loves cartoons. Jason loves playing chess. Jason is someone who reads John A. Williams, right? He's well-read, he's educated. In a lot of ways, in most ways, he's more intelligent and more mature than Buck, actually. And exactly, Jason Reynolds. And Buck, you see this guy that is full of potential, and he is organized. Even when he's at Starbucks, he says it, he's the head nigga in charge, right? But he also is extremely relatable. He's almost an everyman because he graduated from Bronx Science, one of the top schools in the States, but he's working at Starbucks. And that presents a question of your head. You're like, wait a second, like what, why? And the reader has to read more to understand why is this person who America would deem a failure because he's working in this job, not pursue something higher on his own. And that's when Rhett comes in, and Rhett activates his potential. And at first, it's disastrous, then it's great, then it's even more disastrous. But talking about some of the other characters like Clyde or Frodo or even Rhett, I wanted them, as I was referring to before, to fit into a type, but also constantly break out of it, right? So we see Clyde, who is this uber bro, he's wearing Sperry's and Dockers, his blonde hair, he's from Greenwich, right? All of that was on purpose. But at the same time, at another time in the book, you see him consoling people. You see people loving him. You see him almost sobbing into Rhett's shoulder at one point, where you're not like, this guy is just an asshole. He's an asshole and more, right? We are not one thing. And it's the same thing with Rhett. The character, I can go on, but I'll end it here. The same thing with Rhett, where I wanted Rhett to conform to the type of an eccentric startup CEO. People who know startups, or people who don't even know startups but know about someone like Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs always rocked a black turtleneck and jeans because he didn't want to have to think about what he was going to get dressed in the next day, right? We have a bunch of different CEOs who have their own quirks and idiosyncrasies. And I wanted Rhett to be that force that was inspiring, that could get people to do more than they thought they could. But I also flipped it on its head because he's spouting religious verses, biblical verses, right? He'd be like, he'll quote John 3:16 and then say, fuck these motherfuckers in the same breath. And you're like, what? I've really never heard that. And for me, people who are in the startup world will read the subtext, because in the startup world, religion is a taboo. It's a huge taboo. No one talks about religion. No one talks about race. If someone rolls up into a startup and like, yeah, I'm going to church on Sunday, people are like, what? You're going to church? You still believe in God, right? It's a taboo. And that's why I wanted Rhett to be familiar, but also extremely unfamiliar. And I was trying to do that with almost every character while having fun with some of them. And some of them I did make clownish, but that's just how it went.
But even the clownish characters really do have some dynamism to them. And I think that you did a really good job of pulling that off. And I was going to mention Rhett's religion because it's so weird. He'll be in the room with all of these people telling them what to do and taking them through hazing rituals. And then suddenly he's on his knees praying. And you see a lot of vulnerability, I think, in everyone. Darren, Buck, becomes almost like a Kylo Ren supervillain at some points. And I don't want to give too much away, but I think there's so much betrayal in the book from multiple levels. I mean, he gets betrayed, he betrays other people. Soraya in particular, I think, and his mother are kind of implicated in the ways that he behaves. Um, I wonder how you approach balancing the really, really dark parts of the book with all of the humor, because it is quite dark when you think about what's happening at the startup and how nuts the racism is. It's also very real. But what ends up happening to Darren is quite dark. So how did you balance all of that out, and how did you know how far was far enough to go?
Wow, that last part. I've never been asked that. So I mentioned it before, but this book, it's just really an imprint on my mind. There are many dark places I go, and then friends will know, and it's not like I'm like, I was going to say manic in some way, because that's serious for a lot of people in their own lives, right? But on the one hand, I will be very serious and sincere and discussing dark topics, and then 5 minutes later, I'm trying to laugh at it in a way of just moving forward and releasing that out of my body. So for me, I did not want to write 400 pages of doom and gloom and tragedy and trauma. There are writers and artists far better than me who have done that and who will do that. And I didn't want to attempt that, especially because I do mean it, right? I wrote this book for Black people, and everyone else is welcome to come along for the ride. Of course, I want people beyond us to read it and reflect and enjoy it, right? This isn't exactly, even though it can come off that way, it's not exclusionary, but I was just trying to think of the people that I wanted to serve with this book. And because of that, we don't need to read 400 pages, at least for me, of doom and gloom, because we live a lot of it. So I wanted to highlight the reality of this young man. And I don't even want to say our reality, because our reality is not one thing, but I wanted to highlight his reality. And I also wanted to showcase the humor and the absurdity in it, and use humor as a way to underscore the horror. But the challenge there, and it's not so much a challenge for me, or maybe it is a challenge for me to reckon with, is that there will be people, and it's Lena who brought this up to me actually a year ago after reading. There will be people who read it and say, damn, this shit was funny as hell. Like, this is so funny. This is hilarious. This is great. And they will never understand the subtext of the horror of what Darren experiences. And then there's going to be people who say, oh, everything that happens to Darren was really absurd. Like, none of that would really happen. Like, well, whatever, like, you know, these really racist things. But for me, while I didn't experience anything in the workplace like Darren does in terms of racism, I've experienced it outside of the workplace in bizarre and extreme ways. So rather than say, hey, here's some really racist stuff that happened to me when I was younger, I wanted to translate it to the workplace and have Darren experience it. And I paused before saying that because it wasn't easy for me to do that. It wasn't easy for me to have things happen to Darren and to have Darren also do things to other people, especially those who loved him. It was not easy. And some people might say, who cares, man? These are just characters in a book. This is just, you know, wood or wood pulp. I don't even know what books are made out of, plastic and all that stuff, right? Who cares? But who cares are the people who look at Darren and say, I know Darren. Who look at Darren's mom and say, this is my mom. Who looks at Wally Cat or Mr. Rawlings and say, this is my grandfather. These are the people that I passed on the corner. These are my family members. And they are real. So it wasn't easy for me to do that. And in terms of how did I know how far to take it, I was trying to keep myself in check, but then there were definitely times when I said, F it, just like go big or go home. And there are certainly parts in this book that are too much for some people. And my response to that is, I'm sorry if anything in this book really messes up your day and like hurts your heart, but this book is not meant to be a nice ride. This book is meant to be a hostage situation. And I'm not letting you go. Even when the book's closed, I want you to think about this. Yeah.
I love that. I love how unapologetically you speak about how you've written for Black people in the tradition of Toni Morrison and so many other people, and that if other people want to come to the table, that's cool, but that's not your primary audience. And I also think it's so cool that you were able to be as mean as you could to your characters, because I think that's a really hard thing to do as a writer. You get super invested in these people and you don't want to do bad things to them. And you had to do a lot in order to make this plot work and to expose the kind of absurdity of racism and the absurdity of capitalism and the way that these corporations work. So I think it was really smart to take it as dark as it is. And I don't think you have to apologize for any of that. I don't think it's going to ruin anyone's day. And if it does, they don't know how to read properly. Um, I want to ask you one more question before I open it up to the audience. And that's just, did you get any pushback on the title? And I'm asking that because, you know, it's a little bit provocative. And I got a lot of pushback for Heads of the Colored People. There's a certain chain that did not want to buy as many copies of it as they might have if I had changed the title. And they threatened me with that. And so I had to have this big meeting with my agent and my editor on like a horrible day where we were all crying about should we change the title, and were you able to just sort of push this through automatically with your sales background, you know, convince people that Black Buck was the right way to go, or did people kind of push back against it?
Yeah, so my sales background, I think, does afford me a certain level of persuasion, but I rarely, if ever, have to rely on it with my team because we just trust each other. I trust them to do their jobs. They trust me to do mine, and they trust me as the expert of my work, right? That doesn't mean that it's just like, yeah, Mateo, do whatever you want. I mean, at the end of the day, no one's going to tell me what to do, to be completely honest, right? My mom's probably in here. My mom is the only person that can sort of do that, and even she has a hard time. But there is a back and forth, and there's mutual respect. And I hear them out, they hear me out, and I do take what they say into consideration, and they take what I say into consideration. But about the title, at first, and about the title, for anyone that's, I see this is where I'm almost going to hold myself back, but for anyone who saw the Read with Jenna announcement, when Al Roker heard this title, my man looked vexed. My man looked vexed. But what you're saying is real for a lot of older people, especially Black people, but also white people and everyone in between that has been in the States. They hear Black Buck and they're like, Black Buck, hold up. This is what people used to call the untamed enslaved person, typically a man who the enslavers believed was going to burn down the plantation and steal the women and just mess everything up. And I chose that title. It wasn't willy-nilly, and it wasn't really to be provocative. It was more so because that's the energy that Buck is coming with in this book. He's not burning down these corporations, but he's burning down what they stand for from the inside out. So that's why I chose it. But again, to answer your question directly, there did come a time, I don't remember how long, maybe months into us selling the book, where I got an email saying that some people are uncomfortable with the title. Can you explain? And at no point during this process have I really been unchill. But when I got that email, I said, there's no way that this title is going to be changed. So I articulated all of my thoughts on what the title meant, on why I chose it. There's the historical definition that I was very purposeful about. There's the fact that Darren is Black, and then he is renamed Buck. There's the fact that he worked at Starbucks. And then there is the financial undertones of this book of Black Buck, Black Bucks, Black wealth, and people hopefully being able to take away some gems in order to get a little bit more coin, whether it's asking for a raise, whether it's for advocating on the behalf of other people to be allowed entry into a certain industry, whether it is, you know, something else like that. So I explained, and then the email I got back was like, whoa, done, perfect. And the second time it was brought up was in a bookseller event. We threw this really cool bookseller event where basically it was like a sales seminar. It was private. and it was for independent booksellers. And a great guy, and I'm so happy she said this, said, hey, I've gotten some pushback from people on my sales side who feel uncomfortable with the title. And I thanked him, and then I just reiterated what I had sent in that email months prior. So again, this title was not willy-nilly. It wasn't really meant to like, oh, let me just provoke people and trigger them. It was more so just, this is the energy of the book, and I want to respect it with this title. And if people don't like it, I understand. But I hope that you can go beyond the title and read the pages.
I feel like if Jenna Bush Hager can, then pretty much anyone can. So I appreciate that explanation. I'm going to turn it over to Lena for a beautiful poetry performance, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience for some questions so that we can keep track of the time. Lena, whenever you're ready.
Hold on, it's just the old lady working the technology.
Real quick, Lena. Let me just give a personal intro. So Lena is a member of the Rhode Island Writers Colony. That is a writers colony that I am blessed to be a part of. I was blessed to find. You have a lot of people in the chat that are my siblings from the colony, and Lena and I were in the same cohort. Yes. It was her. It was an incredible woman named Kuratain Muhammad. It was Carla Dupre, and it was Jason Reynolds. And we were together for 2 weeks. Lena bounced after a week because she had some stuff to do, but we were together for 2 weeks in a place called Warren, Rhode Island. Warren, at the time, or at least when I looked in the census of 2010, even though I was there in 2018, had a population of 98.4.6 white people. So the colony would come in, and we'd go to Main Street Cafe, and people would say, hey, are you part of the colony? And I'd be like, whoa, what gave it away? You know, so they just knew that we were there. And Lena was my homie. We picked her up from the train station, and I went to give her a handshake, and she gave me a hug. And I said, oh, this is what it is. And then during that car ride, she told me a portion of her life story. And then we had a lot of other fun. I'm not going to get into all the details, but people got lost in the street at certain times. Things were said, things were read, and it was incredible. So Lena, thank you for being here. Thank you for getting ready to share your words with us. And I'm just so grateful to call you a friend.
Mateo, so thank you, Greenlight. Nafissa, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you tonight. But for everybody watching, first of all, let's just everybody buy the book. It's amazing. It's been a journey, and I'm so glad to be here with you on this day, Mateo. Second of all, for everybody watching, you should know this is Mateo's day, and he has called us. He's called us in, he's called us up, and he said, join me. So when you hear Mateo speak, Mateo, when people hear you speak, they hear the energy, they hear the fun, they hear the life, but you don't have to scratch the surface to get to the humility. So what we have before us is this humble man who has made space in his creative life to bring everybody in. And it's such a beautiful thing, and it's so much a part of your nature, Mateo. And I want to say thank you. So I'm honored to be here. I think it's beautiful that you're making space for some creative work that's not yours, because this is your night. And I hope I do you justice. So this is one of my newer poems. It's called We Too Can Write of Clouds. We too can write of clouds. I'm in the shower thinking of war. The TV is on, and we are at home always half listening, and they speak of war. The television yells of war, and I think of X-Men and Raiders and Orchard Park Trailblazers, young boys marking concrete and ink spill of night, Blue Hill Ave as it runs past Humboldt, a slash of lamb's blood marks the spot of my father's front door. I think of numbers, the annual count from shadowed battlefields of shadow children, 153 boys who will always be 19, 17, 15, even 20, but never 21. Today's color is war, and I think of brother, real boy of bone, the red of his shroud, and his face an icon worn on t-shirts large, draped regalia of his boys. They forever circling his casket, lilies of the field bent limply towards his extinguished light. All this time, his grave just dirt after all, bare, forlorn. Back then, they didn't call it war. No shelter in place, no plan, nothing to bail out. The water is hot, and the window above me, just the span of the width of palm, does not open. I'm old now and tired. Today, just another day. At the other side of door is clipped speech of man in suit and tie with numbers at the ready. The water is hot, and I am naked, noting the window above me is clear, not fogged, some trick of science. Beyond the frame of this window, the sky reaches, and I consider 16,790 days, and a black mother's magic of slowing heart and smoothing face of turning blind eye and other cheek. Another look beyond the frame, square of glass still clear, a spread of open sky. If I can make magic of self, I can make beauty of these days. We too can write of clouds.
I know there's a bunch of you clapping behind your screens right now. Thank you, Lena. Thank you for sharing your words. Thank you for sharing your art. Anyone out there who's like an agent or an editor, Lena has poems on poems. I'm not going to offer her to share them with you. I'm just saying you could hit her up and it'll do what it do. I'm going to pass it back to you, Nafissa.
That was beautiful, Lena, and
Thank you.
right on for, I think, where we are and where we've been, and unfortunately where we might still be going for a little while. So audience, questions. There's so much love in the chat, which is wonderful, but if you have questions, could you put them in the Q&A function where the two little message bubbles are? That would be great. So here's one from Candace. I know this story is inspired by personal experience, so we know why the focal point was sales, but for real, why did you choose sales as the container metaphor throughout the story, given you are intentionally speaking to Black people? Why are you talking to us about this? Well, then she said, never mind, he answered, which I didn't see at first, but
No,
do you say a little bit more about that, Mateo?
Yeah, I mean, for me, sales in the world of startups are just things that I know well. So when I was writing this book and I wanted to write something true, especially to combat systemic racism through uplifting us, sales was just the most readily available tool. It was what I could go to. If not, right, if I wanted to write about a lawyer, right, I got a homie, Gao, maybe Gao's in here, I don't know. Gao, when he began working in this certain place, I don't want to put all this business out there, he was one of two Black men in a class of 49, right? So I think about Gao, and this book is for Gao, even though it's about sales. But right, I could have tried to write about Gao's life, and then I would have had to do a lot of research in the law and people going to law school and the lack of diversity there, representation. But I didn't want to do all of that, right? I didn't have a lot of time. I'm trying to get on, right? And I'm someone who firmly believes that we could all go tomorrow, right? So I had to get this book out, and I had to face themes in my life that I was shying away from, and sales was one of them. My experience in the world of startups was another. Race and my life was a third. And I just jumped in. I had to muster enough courage to jump in, and Black Book came to be.
That's great. Reggie says, towards an expanded Black canon is how I was introduced to your writing. Was there a goal to write yourself into that expanded Black canon?
My man, Reggie. That's Reggie Reeds. That's my man. He's I don't want to say he's just a bookstagrammer. He's so much more. I wasn't thinking, oh yeah, let me write myself into this canon. I already knew that whatever I wrote was going to be a part of it. And we see Jason Reynolds in the chat, right? Most, if not all of you know who Jason Reynolds is. But Jason opened up my eyes to a world of the Black canon that we're typically not taught, right? And I say this with the utmost respect. We know about Toni Morrison, rightfully so. We know about James Baldwin, rightfully so. Some of us may know about Zora Neale Hurston, right? Some of us may know about Langston Hughes. Some of us may know about Ralph Ellison. But when I spent time with Jason, he put me on to people who are some of my favorite writers, and then people who led me to other writers who've influenced my life. I mentioned John A. Williams a lot. Jason told me about John A. Williams. Chester Himes. Jason told me about Chester Himes. Ann Petrie. Jason told me about Ann Petrie. All of these people. Gail Jones. And I'll never forget it. We were in this bookstore in Providence, I believe, called Cellar Stories. And Jason was handing me books and telling me about these people. And I said, damn, bro, like I'm on the second draft of my own book, but I don't know about any of these other people. And he turns to me, right? Jason's a big dude. Jason's 6'3". He got a voice that is deep as the Grand Canyon. He got these flowing locks. And he turns to me and he looks down, because I'm not tall. And he says, listen, bro, you were in this whole world of startups. You're just playing catch up. That's it. You're just playing catch up. So yeah, it's just like, you know, it meant a lot to me. And to answer your question, Reggie, Jason teaching me and introducing me to these people helped me see that I wasn't writing alone, that I wasn't by myself, that I was doing something original, but also not new, that I was part of a large tradition. I hope that answers your question, brother.
That's great. We have time for 2 more questions, and one of them is from Jason. Can we just give props to Jason Reynolds, who is like everybody's mentor, everybody's everything. He's wonderful. I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you, but I mean, you have fans of every gender and every age, and I think you've been so good to so many of us that it's worth giving props to Jason. But from Troy, has Starbucks reached out to you for any promotions with your book? I was initially drawn to the cover and the outstanding artwork and the title. It was awesome, and the audiobook is fire too.
That's Troy, man. Troy's going hard for Black Buck on Insta. Thank you, Troy. No, they haven't reached out. And there was a time when I thought that I was going to have to change the name Starbucks. That was also something I absolutely did not want to do. I was like, first off, this is free advertising. You know, second off, I'm not changing it. Like, I really did not want to change. I changed the name of the news station, actually. It was called something else before. But I didn't want to do it, so they didn't reach out. And before the book came out, I read, I believe it's called Pour Your Heart Into It by Howard Schultz, founder of Starbucks, or he was the head, someone that bought Starbucks basically from another company. And this dude, Howard, I don't know him, but I think he liked the book. But Starbucks is also a corporation. So they may eventually find out about this book and do something, like put a stop to the printing. I don't know, but I'm ready to go to battle with Starbucks. And I also detest coffee. No disrespect to coffee. It's a great indigenous beverage that has roots stretching way back, but Starbucks can get it.
And I think Darren also hates coffee, so that clearly came from you a little bit. So last question, Jason says, I binged the show Industry recently and it made me think of you and your work. How do you think this story changes if Darren is instead a woman? Also, what was most difficult when writing it as you walk the satirical line, which was a question I was going to ask you, because we all know a joke only works if it works.
That's right. Jason, man, asking these tough questions. All right, how do I think the story changes if Darren instead is a woman? Well, I mean, it's going to be 10 times harder, in my opinion. Imagine if Darren were a woman and he had to hear the things that Clyde says about women, right? In this book, Clyde, one of the people at the startup named Someone, is saying a lot of bad stuff, not just inappropriate, but bad stuff, not just incorrect, but bad stuff. And some of it is related to women, right? Whether it is during their interview, when Clyde is objectifying Muslim women, right? Because Darren's girlfriend, Soraya, she's from Yemen, or whether it is Clyde trying to teach Darren a lesson about sales and saying that if you were to hit on a woman, you wouldn't be hesitant, so don't do it on a sales call. So there are people like Clyde who exist, and there are people like Darren, but in woman form, who exist in these places. And what they have to go through, I can't speak to it, right? Because I'm a man and I have my own privilege. But I am sure at what they have to go through, especially if they're a woman of color, especially if they're Black, is far worse in many ways than what Darren has to go through. And there was a scene in the book that spoke to that, but I cut it out actually. And to Jason's second point, what was most difficult when writing it as you walk the satirical line? Because we all know a joke only works if it works. Yeah, when I was writing some of the funnier parts, there were a couple when I was like, yo, this is gonna hit. And then there were other parts when I was like, yo, this could really fall flat in its face. But for me, writing isn't worth it if you don't take a risk. Life isn't worth it without risk. So at the sake of some of them flopping, I still pursued them, right? There's one in there about Steve Harvey. No disrespect to Steve Harvey, but my mom is convinced that if he were to read this, he will be very upset. That's all right. I'm okay with that. But in terms of the difficulty in satire, I've said it before in interviews, I'm going to say it again. I wasn't thinking I was writing a satire, to be completely honest. I knew I was writing some absurd stuff and that there were satirical elements, but I wasn't like, let me write this hot satire. Satire, I think some people hide behind it. It would be very easy for me to not answer questions straightforwardly and say, yo, it's just satire. What are you bugging out about? It's just satire. It's just a joke. It's just a joke, right? In the way that so many people gaslight other people about their real experiences. I was like, yo, it's just a joke. It's just satire. Who cares? So there definitely are some satirical elements, but I wasn't writing it as like, yo, this is going to be a satire. I wrote a lot of this in earnest. I really did. A lot of the crazy turns, yeah, they're crazy on the face, but they weren't that crazy in my head because I believe people are capable of doing anything, especially in this day and age. Look at what happened today. Look what happened today. So I wrote a lot of it in earnest, and there are definitely some absurd things. One absurd thing, though, that no one's ever brought up to me that's so weird is there's a damn pig in the office. Like, there's a pig in this office. When we start at someone, you see a redheaded woman carrying a piglet around. And by the third or fourth part of the book, the piglet has turned into a market weight pig. No one's ever brought that up. That is like one of the most absurd things in the book. But yeah, that's what I gotta say on the satirical element. We got a lot more questions. I know we don't have time, but we probably went over. Yeah, we went way over time. If you want to ask me them, come to another event. We got 2 next week, or just hit me up on however you could hit me up, and I'd be more than happy to answer your questions.
Mateo, you've been so wonderful, and I just want to point to, I folded down so many pages and like starred them, but the Steve Harvey one was one of them. So I just want to leave us with this. This is one of Darren's tips. If you're a Black man, the key to any white person's heart is the ability to shuck, jive, or freestyle, but use it wisely and sparingly. Otherwise, you're liable to turn into Steve Harvey. That was one of the like laugh out loud moments for me. And I think that there are so many in here, but like you said, this book is deep. It's not just funny. It's not just satire. There's scathing criticism that's right on time, but it's also kind of timeless. And you've done a beautiful job answering questions, and I just wish you even more success. I think you're going to totally soar. I predict big things for you in your career. And I want to thank Lena and Greenlight Books and everyone who showed up here tonight to talk. And like Mateo said, you could hit him up and ask him other questions. He's very, very approachable. So good night, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all. Love you. Be well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mateo, Nafissa, and Lena for tonight's wonderful event. And thank you everyone who came and shared this space with us tonight. A reminder, in case you missed any part of tonight's event or just want to indulge in a rewatch later on, that the recording will be up on our YouTube channel within a couple days, Greenlight Bookstore, so keep an eye out there. Also a reminder, if you do not have your hands on Black Buck yet, you can get it at Greenlight Bookstore, in person noon to 7, or online at greenlightbookstore.com for shipping or in-store pickup. And you can grab a signed copy while supplies last at Greenlight right now if you're ordering online. just make sure to request a signed copy in the order comments field at checkout. Thank you so much again, everyone. Yes, that's a beautiful cover. I love it so much. But thank you again, everyone, for coming out tonight, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye, everybody.